You speak, but no one hears. You try to hold your space, but it keeps getting smaller. In Neighbors, the noise looks playful, but underneath, it's a quiet story about being overlooked and what happens when you finally push back. On the surface, Neighbors is just a game, a suburban role play filled with hello neighbor, greetings, and imaginary pets. But underneath, it's a quiet portrait of social overwhelm, of boundary testing, and of what it feels like to be a person learning how to hold your own amid other people's wants. Let's start with Bluey. She's trying to do something simple, build a house. A pretend one, sure, but it matters to her. It has a reading nook, a comfy chair, her own front yard. She's creating something just for herself, but slowly, bit by bit, the world around her pushes in. Bingo builds too close. Bandit blasts noise next door because nothing says loving father like barking on all fours mid-book club. Her carefully built space gets swallowed by someone else's needs. And every time Bluey tries to protect it, to say, hey, this matters to me, she's told to ask nicely. But have you ever been there? In a conversation, a relationship, a room, where the volume of your voice didn't match the importance of your feelings? Where you weren't yelling, but you might as well have been invisible? Bluey tries all the right things. Meanwhile, Bingo's building an ark and Bandit's revving a chainsaw with no wheel. But sure, let's stay polite. Bluey's respectful, thoughtful, clear. But still, she's overlooked. And when your words go unheard long enough, something starts to settle in. Maybe what I need isn't important. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm too much. That's a dangerous place to land. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. And Neighbors knows that place. It shows how silence can grow inside someone when no one's listening. But here's the twist. She does. Over and over again. And it doesn't work. Here's the part that hits home, especially if you've ever felt unseen in your own life. We teach kids to use their words, to be polite. But Neighbors shows us what happens when that still doesn't work. When gentle requests get steamrolled by louder needs. And that's not just a kid problem, that's an adult problem too. Ever been in a meeting where you made a great point and someone else repeated it louder and got the credit? Or in a relationship where you calmly asked for change and nothing happened until you finally snapped? This episode quietly mirrors those moments. The ones where being reasonable doesn't get a response because everyone else is too wrapped up in their own noise. And it poses a powerful question. What do we teach kids and ourselves about asking for what we need? About saying no firmly and kindly, and about what happens when the people around us don't listen? So what does this episode really mean? It's not just a goofy pretend play about pets and chainsaws. It's a metaphor. Every house is a person. Every boundary, a personal limit. Every interruption, a moment where someone's need gets eclipsed by someone else's behavior. Bluey isn't being dramatic when she stomps or shouts. She's overwhelmed. She's trying every tool she knows to be heard. First politely, then assertively, then with a growl. And only then does the dynamic start to shift. Why? Because finally, Chili sees her. And this might be the most important moment in the episode. Not when Bluey wins, but when her mom says simply, I do see. That line is everything. It's not a fix. It's not a solution. It's acknowledgement. Because sometimes the thing we need most isn't advice or correction or even a tidy ending. It's for someone to see the space we're trying to protect and stand beside us in defending it. In family life, and life in general, it's easy for boundaries to get blurred. Kids push limits, parents get tired, noise creeps in, and often, the person who's being the most considerate ends up with the least consideration. This episode reminds us that politeness isn't a shield, that being nice isn't the same as being heard, and that learning to set boundaries, real ones, takes more than just soft words. It takes strength, clarity, and sometimes a little help. Because empathy alone doesn't fix things. It has to be paired with action. We see this with Chili. She's patient at first, then overwhelmed, then determined. And when she really draws a line with Bandit, please, fix it, everything changes. Not because she got angry, but because she got clear. Now, let's talk about the hidden brilliance of this episode. Every character in Neighbors represents a different emotional role. Bluey is the boundary setter. Bingo is the well-meaning space taker. Bandit is the chaotic neighbor. And Chili is the mediator, torn between keeping the peace and honoring her own limits. When Bandit finally confesses, it just gets so lonely sometimes. The whole episode shifts. His noise wasn't cruelty. It was a cry for connection. Bluey learns that too. She stops pleading and starts adapting, making trades, adjusting her space, speaking with quiet clarity. And in doing that, she gets what she really needed. Not control, but respect. Because when you don't set a boundary, the world will build around you. Without you, your time, your space, your energy, all offered up by default. And before long, you start to feel erased, like your needs are negotiable, like your discomfort is a small price for someone else's comfort, but you matter too. Your inner reading nook, that little space inside you where peace lives, it deserves protection, not later, not when it's convenient, now, and not just from others, but sometimes from that voice in your own head that says, just put up with it. And suddenly, the chainsawing isn't just annoying, it's a coping mechanism. That's the episode's quiet genius. Everyone's actions make sense once you understand what they're feeling, but none of those feelings justify ignoring someone else's needs. That's the adult truth tucked into the kid chaos. You can be hurting and still be held accountable for how you treat others. You can need help and still be asked to respect boundaries. So what do we take from this? First, it's okay to ask for space, even from people you love, especially from people you love. Second, it's okay to insist on being heard, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Because teaching our kids to use their words only works if we, as adults, actually listen when they do. And third, no one can read your mind. If you're overwhelmed, say so. If you're hurting, speak up. If you're nearing your edge, don't wait until you explode to let it show. Boundaries aren't just for conflict, they're for connection. They're how we make room for each other, without losing ourselves in the process. At the very end of Neighbors, something beautiful happens. Bluey sits in her house again. Her space is restored. And it's not because she dominated the others or made them feel bad. It's because they finally listened. Bandit got pets, Bingo got support, and Bluey got her peace. And maybe that's the quiet wish of every overwhelmed soul. Not to win, but to be understood. Not to shout, but to be heard. So if you've ever felt pushed aside by loud neighbors, busy families, or just the noise of the world, then you know that being ignored doesn't always look like someone saying no. Sometimes it's just them not looking up, not answering, not noticing that something in you is quietly slipping away. But you can look up, you can notice, you can rebuild your own sense of worth, not from the approval of others, but from the unshakable truth that your needs are not a nuisance. Let this episode be your reminder. You're allowed to have space. You're allowed to be heard. And you don't have to shrink just because someone else expands. Because being a good neighbor, it isn't about being quiet. It's about being kind and aware. It's about learning to share space, not just take it. So tonight, ask yourself, where have you been trying to ask nicely and not been heard? Where are you allowed to draw a line, gently but firmly? And who in your life might just be waiting for someone to say, I do see? Because sometimes that's all it takes, not a solution, just someone who notices that you're there. And if all else fails, relocate to your own cushion, and pretend the neighbors don't exist. Works for Bluey. Did this episode of Bluey teach you something about boundaries or being heard? Let us know in the comments. And if this helped you feel a little more seen, go ahead and like and subscribe. Until next time, protect your peace and maybe check on your neighbors.